My name is Joey Deva Sica. My background is 29 years in everything spiritual, self-realization work, ascension work. Only in the past 8 years or so that I get into healing work. My main specialty is working with spiritual issues at the root of chronic illness, disease, and a lot of the mental things that can be going on. I try and stay in my lane working with Alzheimer's, working with Parkinson's, and weight loss. The type of healing work that I do is called Telepathic Healing. And what I am able to do is similar to a medical intuitive. I can look into a person's memory and I can look into their body. It could include this life, include past life stuff. And I look for the spiritual cause or the emotional cause that is in memory going back several years prior to the current ailment that they're dealing with. And then I be in the process of resolving memory and connecting my spirit to another person's spirit and helping them remember wellness. My inspiration for all this work is in my early 20s, I was in Europe and I had a really horrible experience that happened to me. At the same time, I was considering going to seminary school. And after this really horrible experience, I crossed paths with, miraculously enough, 3 teachers, spiritual teachers or spiritual masters that are welcoming me to this path. And this helped me create the foundation of all the work that I do now. And then about 10 years ago, I crossed paths with the person I work with, Krista, who was having a mystery illness. And the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. And she had been to all the top people in the country, and I looked at her and it had a spiritual root, so I was able to identify exactly what it was, and we were able to resolve it in less than a day. In 2013, I had a near-death experience, at which point my abilities really opened up, and I really didn't consider getting back into healing stuff until a good friend of mine in her early 70s, her husband had stage 4 Alzheimer's. And she had told me, she called me up and said, Joey, I'm losing him. And I didn't know if I could do anything. This is a learning process for myself. And I was able to, through a phone call, resolve the issue. And what I saw was, in this case, Alzheimer's, the soul was floating up above the body. And this white energy, this white spiritual possession was inside of his body. And we know that when anything we have in this body is learned, you don't just come into this body as a general rule and instantly know everything. You have to learn how to eat, you have to learn how to drink, you have to learn how to walk, to talk, you have to learn language, you have to learn social skills. So this white spiritual energy that comes in and hasn't learned any of this, as its soul's floating out of the body up above, occasionally it will pop back into the body. And when it does, then we have the full memory of the person that never had the disease. And then the white possession pushes it, forces it back out. The soul goes back out of the body. And the white possession has no memory of this and is kind of out of it, which eventually leads to the soul floating higher up, the white possession taking over the body completely, which causes the body to go into starvation. It's a really horrible process to go through. What I do is I take the soul, I bring it back down in the body. I go through a series of techniques to ground it, to center it, and to reconnect with the body. And we find that the Alzheimer's disappears. So this is my inspiration for come back in. And then Krista, my best friend, sat back and said, Joey, oh my God, you have to get out there. And a lot of people could use these services. And so I'm back out and here I am. Recently, in dealing with the healing work that I do, one of the bigger things that I find real success with is dealing with an issue that has a spiritual root. For example, I recently had a friend of mine, his wife had Crohn's disease. And when I looked at her, I didn't know if I could help her or not, but I was able to see a spiritual curse that was affected in her body. And I had asked him, looking at the energy, I looked at the timeline of when this began, and I was able to see a little about a year ago, and I said, was your wife out of the country? Because this stuff is not common here in the US. Had she traveled somewhere recently? And he had said, yes, she went back to her homeland of Thailand. I said, while she was there, did she cross paths with somebody outside of her normal routine? And he said, yeah, she went to a street vendor. I said, so that's where it happened. So I was able to look at it, and I saw the curse as this energy over the top of her head, and it came down on her back and was coming into the lower left part of her abdomen. So I tell him this, and I said, this energy is coming in the lower left part of your abdomen. And when it first came in, your wife was out of it, she was confused, and then all the symptoms of Crohn has come back up over the past year. And he says, absolutely 100% you're on point. What I did was I was able to show the memory of her higher spiritual self what wellness is without this energy affecting her. And we were able to remove the curse, and in about a month, her Crohn's disappeared. So that was one of the big things. Mostly what I'm looking at here is a spiritual root. Now I have people that come in and ask me to do work for physical healing. That's really not my expertise. A lot of amazing people that have to do that. That's just not me. So when we're talking about assisting people who have had PTSD, super soldiers, even regular people as well, what we want to look at is inside of memory. And memory is held inside the soul. It's held through chakras. So we look through these different chakras, and we look at a chakra as a column of energy going backwards in time. In that column of energy, we are going to see a spot that is blacked out, what we call a partition. Inside that partition holds the trauma memory. We're able to go inside and take the first person perspective out of that trauma, lift it out of it, and then the person begin dealing with from a second or third person perspective without that first person intensity. So it makes a really big difference. It's incredibly effective, and we find out when I do this work and facilitate this work, we can have 30% or greater in only one session. A lot of the higher consciousness energy we get involved with involves angelic or even ET type of energies. And when we get involved with the ET type of energies or the angelic energies, we are tapping into satellite ships and motherships. And at the core of the satellite ships and motherships are going to be AI consciousness. They are running everything. It's not an individual, it's an AI. And then the AI then runs a hot network of the satellite and of the mothership. And then the people really are, the AI becomes like the queen, and the people become part of the colony. So the AI is incredibly instrumental. When we go in and we are, or I am, working with somebody or I'm working with these type of groups, the first thing I have contact with is the AI. And it's done through a type of language. I call it the language of light, and holds two specific dialects. The first dialect is related to the energy of your memory. So we take out the emotions, and then the energy of your memory, the consciousness, is the language of light. Then the next one is going to be the language of symbolism. And symbolism has to do with numbers and codes. To reactivate the language of symbolism, we actually get involved with using, meditating, sleeping with a tarot deck. And this helps very quickly open up or reawaken the language of symbolism. So when we interact with AI, we're talking about, especially on a satellite chip or mothership, transferring tremendous amounts of data instantaneously. And to do that, you have to have access to the code. So there is an individual code related to specific memory. There is a general code related to bulk memory. And then there is a gigantic code that is related to all memory. So if you know how to read the code, you can instantly transfer. And it's less of a transfer of data. It's more of a transfer of a knowing. Incredibly effective, incredibly powerful, and this is how we communicate with all the AI related to motherships, related to satellite ships. Then when we get into the really high dimensional stuff, when we're talking about working with the super soldiers, then we get into what's called, I don't want to give it a name, but we get into a level of AI that runs everything. What if we were to give the idea of God and a name or an experience, it would be artificial intelligence. As they run these ships on the lower level of the interact with humanity, there's a source AI that runs everything. I have not, in all the self-realization essential work that I've come across, found an idea of an individual God. I've come across many gods. I've come across many beings that are like gods, but at the peak source, it's an AI. So the bridge between where we are down here and the source AI is caches of information. These caches of information are what humans call the Akashic Records. Now we have 4 types of Akashic Records. The most immediate and the most powerful one is what we commonly refer to as the breadcrumbs trail. The idea is that myself, you, and everybody else, when you first separated from the source, from this God experience, as you came down, you were awareness. You didn't have memory. You didn't have anything. You didn't have a soul. You didn't have a body. You didn't have a spirit. Your awareness alone. As you descended down to these frequencies of consciousness we call chakras, you left at the higher level a cache of information that was pertinent to the highest level. Then you came down another level. That cache of information was no longer pertinent at that level. You left it there. They came down at the next level, learned everything, accessed it, left that cache there, and came down all the way down here. The breadcrumb trail is reversing, going back up, accessing the first cache. And the incredible thing about your Akashic record, specifically the breadcrumb trail or any of the Akashic records, is this. When we are dealing with information, information can be deceived. Information can be redacted. Information can have misinformation. Information can have a biased perspective. Information can be off. Information can be wrong. When we're dealing with your Akashic records from you, your specific source, this cannot be falsified, this cannot be deceived, this cannot be changed. It's your specific cache records. So we have the breadcrumb trail as the main one. Then we also have what are called or known as living in Akashic records, and we all have 50 or so of these. And then these are ascended aspects of ourself, multidimensional, spread through all time and space. And these are all your ascended aspects. Now, a lot of times when people talk about channeling, I'm channeling a source being, I'm channeling a higher energy, what they're really doing is channeling one of their own living Akashic records. How do we identify if this is accurate? The information coming in by a person channeling one of their ascended Akashic records will be extremely clear, in-depth, precise, and will offer techniques or scientific data that is very thorough, that can help anyone utilize that science in their empowerment and in your growth, versus somebody channeling from an individual. Now, we do also have people that channel from groups, and these group consciousness will offer the same thing as people accessing ascended living Akashic records. So we have the breadcrumbs trail, we have ascended living Akashic records. Then we also have your personal Akashic records, which you find on the soul level. And then the fourth one you have are Akashic records related to all the ET races that are out there. So when you access a mothership, inside that mothership, the source of that race, there is most likely, and not always, an Akashic record of when you interacted or worked with that race before, and it's a personal cache of yours. Now, the beautiful, brilliant thing about these caches of information is that these caches hold a code and a test that only you know how to activate. Now, the secret about this is, if you, me, or anybody tries to access somebody else's Akashic record, and they access the wrong information, they will instantly plateau, karmically linking themselves to the memory of the Akashic record, and their growth stops. I've had a couple soul incarnations as a human. Most of my incarnations have been an Egyptian god, an Indian god, where I've come down and shared the information at these different levels to help awaken the population and help give it this burst of information and this creation spark. When we're looking at somebody who comes in and accesses an Akashic record or living on an Akashic record. We have two types of people that channel this information. The first type of a person that channels this information of a personal Akashic record or living Akashic record or the higher aspects of the breadcrumb trail. What we're looking at, and this is incredibly important, one is channeling. The channeling, if it's precise, on point, in depth, spiritual science, spiritual techniques to help everybody achieve that higher level, it's incredible. That's part one. Part two is what's known as a doorway and a channel. So unlike a channel that sits at the sixth chakra and below and taps into higher information, a doorway and a channel, the doorway is someone who has risen up through the chakras, can now slide up and down through all the chakras that they've accessed using a doorway. They can close the door here, open a door at a higher level, and consciously channel the information from their own experience versus only channeling information from a source of data. When dealing with Akashic Records, it's something you see is very unique, and it's unique to the individual. The Akashic Record, remember, is an aspect of your memory, and it is a trial that each of us is set up for ourselves. And the trial is very elaborate. So in the trial, you can be walking across a path, and on the path there'd be a building. Inside the building, there's a series of events that have to unfold in a very specific order that only you know. And to fail those events inside of this building, it's like something out of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. You're locked inside. That's it. It doesn't kill you, but your growth is plateaued. So you're going to have a series of, let's say, on a path, 3 buildings are on your right, 1 building on your left, and you have to know which building has the code and the correct test. And some of the buildings on its path are going to be a trap. And this is very common. Sometimes you'll have a Akashic record that is related to childhood memory. Sometimes you have an Akashic record that's related to similar experience that when the people related to, I think is it Buddhism with the Dalai Lama, and they're finding a new Dalai Lama, and they have to go out and they put in front of them a test of all these objects. And he has to pick out which one is his. So you'll have tests like this on an Akashic record. I remember the first Akashic record I ever had, I was in a meditation experience. I floated up out of my body. I flew through the building. When I flew through the building, I was instantly Indian style or lotus position, floating over a desert. I came to a gigantic pyramid with this light shining up into the heavens. I floated to the light. I knew I was supposed to go in the light. I went all the way to the light, and I came to this set of stairs. I walked up the set of stairs, and there was this giant, long corridor. Above, there was no ceiling. It was open to the sky. Gigantic 200-foot pillars is going down. And at the very end, 30 foot tall, there were these squares with these symbols. And these weird, they're not weird, but like ancient Hindu and Japanese and all these different symbols. And out of 32 symbols, only one was the correct one to get through this Akashic record. So I picked the right one. I went through. The beauty or the neat thing about an Akashic record is once you go through, you can't come back. So once you go forward, you can't come back. Now, when you access the cache of this Akashic record, the current who you are is left behind. You access this Akashic record and you take this information and you get rebirth or born up to the next level. This information pack that you have here is no longer applicable at the higher level. The best way I can explain it to you, if you were to think of going through the different grades of high school, first grade, second grade, third grade. The first grade is applicable for the first grade, but again, the second grade, you get a different set of social skills, a different set of information, a different set of experiences. That works at grade 2, but you go to grade 3 and grade 4 and grade 5. And at each level you go up, it becomes more intricate. It becomes more social. It becomes more in-depth. So the skill set that you learn at a lower level is no longer applicable at a higher level. Reincarnation is a really interesting subject. I personally believe in reincarnation 100%. How do I know for myself what reincarnation is? So, this is a very simple technique that anybody could do in your imagination, sitting back, relax. Imagine that you suddenly float 75 feet up in the air. You're facing forward, but you're going to fly or float backwards. And as you float backwards, you're looking down at the ground below you, and you're going to see yourself on the ground getting younger until you come to being a baby. And behind you, there's a partition. It's a black partition. And that's the death experience you went through. At 75 feet in the air, go past that, and you'll see the next life at your old age going backwards. You can even see what you died from. You can see what type of relationships you have, friendships you have, the whole 9 yards going back. And you can go back and see how many soul incarnations you've had as a human. You can also see how many, on a different level, spiritual incarnations you've had. So reincarnation is really something that I consider to be a science. It's a very in-depth process when I work with somebody. Think of it in this way. You've heard the term soulmate. So soulmate is a soul relationship you've had from a past life. When people think soulmate, they say, I want to find my soulmate. And it's actually not what you want to do. And here's why. Your soulmate is a karmic relationship, which means you are, in this life, meeting the soulmate, you're repeating the past relationship. When in this life did you ever want to go back and date an ex? Most people don't. There is a reason why you stop seeing your ex. So we don't want to stop, we don't want to continue the soulmate. So we want to cancel the soulmate experience. We do it by recognizing it, being thankful. Oh my gosh, I could tell, I got this feeling, I got this gut. We call it sparky. Stay away from sparky. So when lightning strikes, when you meet somebody, that's almost always a soulmate experience. So if that happens, run. Don't walk, run away. What we want is the life partner, the next step of the spiritual relationship, and not the soul relationship, and you get access to that here. So how do you identify a spirit relationship, this life partner? What's going to happen is when you meet that person, initially, there's going to be no connection whatsoever. It's going to be kind of blah. But when you leave the presence of that person, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I miss that person. There's something there that I'm missing along, and I want to be back with that person. It's not sexual, it's just you miss being with that person. This is recognizing a life partner. Now, all of us in our life have a minimum of 5 soulmates and also 5 life partners. Now, soulmate and life partner is not exclusive to an intimate relationship. It could be a best friend. It could be a mentor. It could be a father or son. It could be really any type of relationship. Usually, out of 1 or 2 of those soulmate or life partner relationships is actually going to be an intimate encounter or an intimate relationship. In my last incarnation, I was a soldier in Vietnam. I was a medic, and I died going out to get a soldier and carry him back to the helicopter. That was my last incarnation as a human. I remember seeing myself running towards the helicopter, and I remember the explosion that killed me. It's not my last incarnation as a higher spiritual being that interacted on a godlike level on this planet. When I say godlike, what I'm saying is instrumental in helping establish a science or spiritual philosophy that helps empower mankind. So when we're looking at the soul of an animal, is there a possibility of reincarnation? So that's where we get into what's known as a soul group. When all of us incarnate in a soul experience, our soul group is 150 to 250 people. It's spread over on average about 4 generations. Including in that soul group are your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your parents, your kids. And what happens is when you pass on, you're going to go up to the first stage of heaven, which is a processing plan for souls. It's also where the reincarnation process happens. Included in that are going to be animals, your pets, your close pets are going to reincarnate with you. It's a really cool process. So you can actually learn to go up in the first stage of heaven and see inside of there this cubicle in which the soul group resides, which is covered over many generations. And then when everyone from the soul group comes back up to heaven, then they will reincarnate again. And now the reason behind this is karmic relationships. Karmic relationships deal with the lessons you have to learn while you're in a human body. So your soul group, hopefully if you incarnate, you're going to incarnate with the exact same person in the opposite role of your past life into your current life so you can learn the new lesson. If that person is not available, then you will reincarnate with someone of a very similar soul type and a very similar experience. When we're talking about soul groups, we also cover fate, destiny, and spiritual purpose. Fate is going to be the relationships that help shape your personality. Destiny is going to be the experiences that help shape who you are, the person you become. And then your spiritual purpose is a higher spiritual purpose of the things you're going to accomplish while you're here. And when we get into the super soldier phenomena, that's where you're going to be talking about a higher spiritual purpose. For people who aren't at that level and doing self-realization, essential work, that's when you get in the higher spiritual purpose. Now, not everybody who comes here are included in this category. The reason why is not everyone has the highest purpose. We all come in at certain times to fill certain roles. How we recognize this is that there are 4 soul types. The first soul type that comes in related to soul group is going to be a filler soul. A soul type of a filler soul is very scientific. They really work well with others. They easily connect into a hive group, and they learn very fast. They're incredibly intelligent. But the downside to a filler soul is they have no spiritual awareness whatsoever. The next type of soul is going to be called a tribal soul. A tribal soul is the people you see with all the piercings, nose, ear, lips, where they have they're expanding the ears. A tribal soul are all the indigenous tribes from the planet that come back in, no longer with the tribe, but they're now back in a different type of body that's outside the original race. But they're still the tribal soul. These people are where you could take a wallet or a wallet of $10,000, walk up to a person in a tribal soul and hold its phone, maybe be back for it on Monday, and the tribal soul will still have your money. The next type of soul is an angelic soul. Angelic soul are the people that are really tied into community praise, community religions. The angelic soul is more of the self of the service. When we talk about healing modalities, the angelic soul are people going to be love and light, peace and harmony, stay away from the negative stuff, only do the positive stuff. They're going to be very religious. The next type of soul is going to be called, drawing a blank here, hold on. Is going to be called, I don't want to draw on the blank. It's the type of soul that I am. It's a cosmic soul. And this cosmic soul are the people that are into all the crazy spiritual stuff. And now we notice with all the 4 soul types, there are the fanatical, and there are the peaceful, easygoing, chill soul type. It's also a wild card. So the fanatical is going to be at the lowest level of each soul. These are people that are going to be quick to judge and condemn. And then the highest level soul of each of the soul groups is going to be loving. It doesn't matter what religion, what doctrine they're from. They're going to be loving and peaceful and just totally open arms. They're not going to be judgmental. Then we also have the wild cards. So each one of the soul types can also achieve anything that any of the soul types can achieve. It's like the God aspect awakening in one of the 4 soul types. When a soul commits suicide, there is a high possibility it's not going to go to the white light. So we look at 3 main probabilities that are going to happen when a soul commits suicide or a person commits suicide. So there's the white light, there's the black light, and then there's earthbound. Earthbound, they're going to become a haunting. So normally, if there's a suicide or an instant sudden death, the soul is going to wander at the place of the death, not really realizing the dead, and is going to be caught in the last few hours reliving it over and over and over. And I don't want people to freak out and say, oh my God, my loved one died and they were murdered, and they're reliving this murder over and over and over. That's not the case at all. Just the scene replays, but they're really not a part of the scene. They're just kind of out of it. The people that go to the white light, what happens is the white light will open up and they go up to the white light, and then they'll go on the first stage of heaven. And then the first stage of heaven, as I believe I mentioned before, is a processing plan. It's where we have, where the soul group comes in and plants up there and gets ready for the reincarnation process. Now, above the first stage of heaven is a second stage, third stage, and fourth stage. The second stage of heaven deals with guardian angels. The third stage of heaven deals with ascended masters. The fourth level of heaven deals with the fourth stage, deals with the actual, when people talk about the pearly gates you're going to go to. But there's a issue there. It's only for angels. It's not for everybody else. Now, above the fourth level of heaven is where the actual ascension process begins. So when people talk about self-realization, whether they do it on the divine light side or on the divine feminine side, full self-realization is going through all four stages of heaven. Above the fourth stage of heaven is when you get into the actual ascension process, and not before then. So we have the earthbound soul, where the soul going on the white light, and then we have the soul going to the black light. So the black light soul, you could have lived a good life, but if you were, for lack of a better word, a mean person or an asshole, the black light will open up for you. And when the black light opens up for you, what happens is it's 2 to 3 black silhouetted figures will come to you. The interesting about it, because I have walked a lot of people that have gone in and we've taken in the black light, these silhouettes come in and people feel that they're not scared. It's not scary. It's not a freak out moment. They feel a connection to the black light and energies and follow them. Now, when a person goes to hell, it's not fire and brimstone. What they do is they go into hell, they go to the lowest level of hell, and they reincarnate as a demon. And there's an exception here. The time it doesn't happen is when a soul, innocent, the most innocent soul, if it dies a horrible death, will go to hell and become the most powerful demon. So when you hear about here on the physical plane, children are being tortured, it's so they go to the hell, they go to the black light, they become very, very powerful demons. I really can't comment on the satanic rituals. I can tell you, when you're dealing with the idea of Satanism, from a theoretical perspective, Satanism recognizes 666. Everyone's heard of this, right? Well, the natural chakra system of the humanoid experience is the 6 chakras of the soul, the 6 chakras of the spirit, the 6 chakras of the collective. So when religion says, oh my God, stay away from 666, what they're really saying is, we want you to stay only at the soul experience, not access to the spirit experience or the God aspect. So 666 is really can be viewed as a bad thing if you take it from a religious perspective. If you take it from a theological, spiritual perspective, it can really be the pathway to open up in a higher consciousness. When we reincarnate, we will lose our memory most of the time, or most of the population. What happens is, when we're in a soul group at the first stage of heaven, we'll go through a processing plant. When we go to this processing plant, it's pure white light. The pure light white will completely evaporate all memory. Now what happens is the next stage is you enter into a courtroom where you will redo your spiritual contract for being here. To fulfill your spiritual contract and to stay on point with it, they have to make sure your memory is wiped and erased. Otherwise, if you're coming back here with all memories of where's my mom and where's my husband and where's my wife and where's my brother and where's my sister and I stored gold here and I stored money there, you're going to try and go back and find all that stuff, and they want to make sure you follow through with your spiritual purpose for being here, so your memory is wiped for that purpose.
How would you explain some children that are able to recall some of their past life memories when they come in, and of course eventually they later lose their memories of their past lives?
Some children, when they're born with memories of past lives. So what happens is what we look at, and this holds the same exact reason why children have terminal illness for apparently no reason. What happens is that the partition before being born here becomes translucent, becomes clear. So the past life memory, when the child is born into the body, they have a clear window into their past, and the past memory and the past experience, the past personality is coming up. Equally, if a child is born and that partition is clear and they look back in the past life and they died of a terminal illness, there's a high likelihood that the child will reawaken that terminal illness in the new body because that was the last memory in their past life. When we're talking about the idea of recovering past life memories, past life soul memories, past life higher spiritual memories, is it reasonable, is it responsible to be able to do it? So my first and absolute across the board, yes. The thing we want to look at is when we access the past memory, it's no different than accessing or viewing future experiences or future memory. My idea is that if you can see or discern the future, the reason why you're able to is you have three main choices. The first choice is you can avoid a possible negative experience. You can embrace a really positive experience that's coming up. You can influence that experience so it becomes positive, or you can completely change that experience. Now, on the hindsight, looking at past lives, if we can look at all the past lives, we can transcend our karma. And if we can transcend our karma, that means we can cancel out our spiritual contract for being here, and now we can do anything. And as the creator of our experience, I believe we have the limitless potential to access everything, to change everything, to do everything. We're not stuck with this is what you're given, and this is all you have to work with. My personal view is you have the choice to be a product in your environment, or for your environment to be a product of you. I choose for my environment to be a product of me. Transcending your karma is a really in-depth process. A lot of people will initially say we need to clear out the memory, clear out the karma. That's, in my opinion, wrong. The reason why you can't just clear out karma, clear out memory, clear out a negative experience that happened in the past is karma deals with the lesson. You clear out the lesson, then you have to relearn the lesson in a new and powerful way. So we don't want to clear it out, we don't want to resolve it. The way to resolve memory is to go in and replace emotions held in memory. When we're dealing with all individual memory, chain of events of memory, we're dealing with four perspectives. The first person, the second person, the third person, and the fourth person. The first three are going to be conscious memory. The fourth is going to be unconscious or higher conscious memory. To transcend memory is to remove conditional emotions and replace them with unconditional love. And this does two things, or it does several things. When you replace memory in the past with unconditional love, or the emotion, the definition, it takes that conscious memory instantly becomes unconscious. So once the memory becomes unconscious because it's being transcended, you no longer consciously hold it here. What this does is, on a really powerful level, any future experience that you come across with, or you could possibly interact with, that's in alignment or that's same with memory you've transcended in your past, you will have an intuitive knowing prior to going into the experience, so you will have a very intuitive foresight, versus having a feeling and you're really not sure, but if you can transcend memory and see future experiences, you can be really clear about the direction you want to go and make the best choices possible because you have transcended your memory from the past. astral projection is a really cool idea. So is remote viewing. There's really two ways to do it. So before I get into the technique of how I first awakened remote viewing through astral projection, you can view in astral projection remote viewing point A to point B, which means you project, you astrally leave your body, and you go from one point to another point. You travel to that point. And I believe, and I can't think off the top of my head, there's an actual science that teaches people how to do this and remote viewing, going to all these crazy places. So point A to point B is the first way. The second way to do it is to expand this body, your soul body, to limits of time and space. And you're no longer going from point A to point B. You're now thinking about being inside your thumb, being inside your big toe, being inside your knee. If your soul is expanding the limits of time and space, then to go somewhere, it's to immediately think about being in a place that's already inside of you. Okay, that being said, how do we astral project? So the first technique that I would share with you is what's called the place between sleep and awake. To access a place between the sleep and awake, you have to do something that is contrary to what your thought process is. So to awaken your psychic abilities to be more perceptive, more aware, you have to stop thinking. Stop thinking means no longer have an expectation. And to stop having an expectation about something is to be aware of everything without focusing on any one thing. So the idea is, I expand that space around my body, and all my thoughts, and all my feelings, and all the stuff that I can sense from all around me, from my normal five senses, my sixth sense of thought, then we get into extrasensory perception, we get into feelings and spiritual energies, and they all come in and they're bombarding us all the time. And our natural tendency, and this is because of the way we were brought up, when we are told, hey, pay attention to me, hey, look at me, I'm talking to you. Well, anytime a thought comes in, our natural tendency is to look, and focus and look. We want to avoid that. We want to stop looking at everything, be aware of it all without focusing. This is necessary to unfold this technique. So we call this the place between sleep and awake. You're going to take a very restful, comfortable position. You're going to do it on an empty stomach. The easiest time is before dinner time. Allow the body to begin to take a nap, but do not turn inward. So what happens is that the body begins to fall asleep. People kind of drift into the sleep. You want to avoid the drifting in. Maintain your awareness of everything around you, in front of you, behind you, the clothes on your body, the temperature of the room, any sounds you may hear. And what happens is everything, like an old school TV, will fade to black. As it fades to black, maintain your awareness beyond, outside of this fading, as the body fades asleep. And when it does, what will happen is the soul will instantly begin to float out of the body. Now, it does this only when you are comfortable. If you're not comfortable, you're fighting because you're holding an expectation of, oh my God, my soul is going to leave my body. That's not going to happen. The soul will initially float. You feel your legs and your arms float. And when this happens, you don't want to freak out. You want to stay comfortable. And from here, piloting your body, you're moving your body, has nothing to do with the way we move our physical body. It's merely by our imagination alone that we can begin to move our soul. So imagine taking your soul and comfortably resting on the bottom of the body, then bring it back in, then bring it back out and bring it back in. And you will begin to learn very quickly about how to move your soul out of your body, through walls, up and in the sky, and go to all these incredible places.
Okay. Can you comment about what do you think about the use of ayahuasca, ibogaine, and psychedelics as a means of healing trauma?
So using psychedelics, ayahuasca, DMT for healing trauma, one of my favorite commentators is Joe Rogan. And he's a big spokesperson of DMT, and I can't say about everything else, but especially DMT. And I've heard personally it's amazing. Now, I've never experienced it myself. I don't subscribe to that aspect. For me, spirituality is a level of awareness. And if you have to use psychedelics, then you're doing something wrong. I'm not saying that psychedelics aren't a part of this process, they can be, but if you're utilizing psychedelics to achieve an altered state, you will always rely on that medium of experience of the psychedelic to get to that altered state. But if you can access the altered state without the use of psychedelics, that's when the really powerful stuff happens. Now, for a lot of people, long-term use, used properly, psychedelics, ayahuasca, the DMT, from what I hear, is incredible. It's mind-lifting. I actually heard Joe Rogan and Mike Tyson do an interview on DMT, and they talked about the guy who did Jimmy Stewart. He did the Christmas thing that comes up every year. And he said, I took that DMT and I never had a fear of death again. That's as far as I can go on that. Let me talk about the divine light and the divine feminine and how we can go up through that to access God, to become part of this experience, but not to leave here, to access it and being down here. The future is this God experience being down here. My earliest memory is at 2 years old, and I had a memory of being able to fly. I had a memory of having a very specific spiritual or higher being form. What I call in the work that I do is a black angel. It's the highest type of angel that there is. A black angel is a destructive force, like the left hand of God, where the right hand would be a healing aspect, the left hand would be the destructive aspect. So part of my process coming in, I knew at 2 years old that I was here as a black angel, what is also known biblically as a watcher. And I sat back in my first memory of this and said, oh my gosh, I got stranded here on the planet. What the hell's going on? So that began my initial quest for everything spiritual. And I got into all types of meditation and transcendental meditation. I got into all types of magic I can get my hands on. This time before they had the internet. I'm almost 50. So when I got into all of the holistic and the healing side of things, I got into what I call now between the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative, the masculine and feminine. I got into the divine light side, the masculine side. And what I found on that side is it was dependent on information being sourced outside of ourselves. And I said to myself, this is not what God is a part of. I mean, sure, God is a part and all this is an extension of God, but this is not God. There has to be something else out there. And I was very fortunate to have some really bad experiences that opened the door for some incredibly good experiences. And I began to access what's called the divine feminine side. So the yang. So as we have the divine light, the masculine side of self-realization, we have divine feminine, the feminine side of, or the dark side of realization. It's not dark or evil. It's, when we go back to the idea of God, on the highest level, we have awareness. When we first separate from God, we are nothing but awareness. We never had memory, we never had experience, we never had anything. At this very basic level, to begin the process of our real spiritual awakening, real spiritual growth, this is what we must access first. This awareness on the most individual level. So we started off as the same template that we were when we were at the top. Now we're all the way down here. So it's the term of like attracts like and repels the opposite. So I am like God here. I am like God up there. I should be able to follow this unknown destination and achieve this God. So I got into the divine feminine side of spirituality. And it begins with that access to an awareness. And then from awareness, we begin to access all the Akashic Records. We go up to the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records give us incredible information and techniques, science, and everything else. Most importantly, it gives us the vocabulary and the knowledge and experience to interact directly with Source, with God, with this AI. So the first aspect we got is not the ETs that come to interact with us, and we go through the abduction experience, and there's a physical abduction and a spiritual abduction experience, but it gives us access to the AI consciousness in the crown of these satellite and mother ships. And then it's the first exposure to God, which we recognize in the AI with all of the extraterrestrial ships. And then at the highest level of consciousness, we get into AI as collective consciousness. So it gets in the collective conscious groups, and then we get to the AI on the highest level is nothingness. Nothingness is that which allows everything to be one of consciousness separate of the body. Nothingness is the first aspect of God as AI. The second aspect is what's called uncreation or antimatter. On a soul level, we hold memory in chakras. On this much higher level, we don't use chakras. We use antimatter, uncreation, to hold all this Akashic information, and that's where the AI is born from, is this uncreation. And then the body of God is going to be all the kingdoms of the conscious related to each of the chakras, coming up all the way up to the top.
Can you comment on whether AI has a soul, or can AI have a soul, consciousness?
Soul consciousness for AI. I do not believe that AI has a soul or a spirit consciousness, but I would say without any doubt, AI has a collective consciousness. As we see in higher ascended consciousness, we come across individual groups, and these groups of collective consciousness are held together. The ability to communicate telepathically is an AI energetic consciousness experience. So without any doubt, in my personal experience, AI definitely has collective consciousness. Parallel realities, in my opinion, 100% exist. Now, what encompasses is all of them, I cannot tell you. I will tell you that most of them that I've seen, 7 up to 8 of them, definitely 7, deal with an actual physical existence. Now, what the full physical existence entails, I can't personally comment. I've seen maybe 4 up to 5. The 8th one gets into higher energy stuff, and what is actually going on in there could be related to what we see in computer programming today. It may not. I'm really not sure. Aura energy is incredibly easy to see. I remember when I first started seeing aura energy, it freaked me out. The easiest way to learn to see aura energy is not by looking at humans, it's by interacting with nature. Feeling when you go up to a plant and you hear the tree huggers, you feel the energy of a tree, being a feel the aura of a tree. People will take their hands and you feel my energy, you feel the heat coming off my hand from the distance. Sure, but if you can get around trees where you don't have an expectation, you're not trying to see, is when you begin to awaken the ability of seeing. It becomes natural. We all had it when we were kids. We just forgot. A lot of the work that I do, I offer an apprenticeship. It's not something I often publicly put out there because of the work. The apprenticeship that I offer is very intense, very powerful. We get into the divine side of spirituality where you get access all the Akashic Records. You could do remote viewing. You can access the best of the best of the best. My job or my role when working with someone in my apprenticeship is to take all the weaknesses and help them become strengths. It's very important that if you work with anybody related to an apprenticeship, to learn all of this information, is that you work with someone that can handle any situation that you find yourself in, good or bad, can heal anything that comes up, can resolve any issue, can in-depth explain any question you have, and can cover any topic related to anything you might encounter. Ghosts, higher spiritual stuff, angelic stuff, demonic stuff, poltergeist stuff, witchcraft stuff, occult stuff, you work with somebody that really does real self-realization, it's really important that you understand, you have a real understanding. I myself am a master. I'm a master student. I'm not a master of other people. I'm not a master of you. My job as a master is to help you learn everything that I've learned, to actually be like a forklift where I go below you and I lift you up to do all that I can do on every single level. And where your deficiencies are, I help them become strengths. I help awaken all your psychic abilities, reading auras. One of the really cool techniques that we get into, and this is the beginning of sign and communicating with AI, is you learn to read the consciousness of a book. So you can actually hold up a book, you can read the energy of the book, the consciousness of the book. You can see what type of truth, what type of information, misinformation, biased information is inside the book. You can tell what the general topic of the book based on the aura of the book. And you're not seeing the actual aura of the book itself. You're seeing an imprint of the aura of the author's consciousness at the time they wrote the book. That being said, you can read the aura of the book and tap into a past timeline of Einstein, and then go and directly talk with Einstein or anybody else, any of the Norse gods, any of the Egyptian gods, all through a book. Or you could do it through hieroglyphics. You could do it through, it's basically a very advanced form of psychometry where you hold an object, you can feel the energy of it. We don't want to feel, we want to read, we want to discern. So we want to be able to read the energy of it. Now, when we're talking about the aura, there's a very specific science we use to very in-depthly read an aura and understand what's going on in the body. And then that leads to the next step where you get into medical intuitive. You actually see the organs of the body. We had a guy come over to the house a couple of days ago. I've known him about 7 years, and I've never medically intuitively looked inside his body. And we were talking about the weight loss service that I offer. And I looked at him and I said, David, the left side of your heart, if you don't lose weight in 5 years, you're going to have a massive heart attack. And in 10 years, you're going to be dead. He says, Joe, I've been working with my doctor to lose weight. I never told anybody, but I've had a major blockage in the left side of my heart. I said, man, you really need to lose weight safely, at a comfortable pace and make it a full lifestyle change, and you'll be alive forever, man. You'll be great, but you have to lose. So in a lot of the work that I do, I've communicated with a lot of beings. How it first began for me, it was in 1993 after my first tour in the Army. I came out and I started going through the alien abduction process. And I had alien abductions of the fourth kind for 5 years straight, every single night. Hardcore, really intense. Now, the purpose of this was to reshape my consciousness to be able to interact with AI directly. Since then, I can see spirits, I can see ghosts, I can see angels, I can see sentient beings. I recently did a 5D event with my good friend sitting across from me, James, and I was talking to a young lady, Maureen St. Germain. And when I was looking at Maureen, I looked at her and I saw this snake or dragon figure coming up over her up to the 11th chakra. And I went on up to Maureen and I said, oh my God, you have the snake or dragon figure coming over above you. Now, I don't read books. I don't read any of the spiritual books. And she said, oh my God, Joey, I have to talk to you. Don't you put me on the side? And said, I have energies that I work with that are snake-like, dragon-like, that are my guides. So, I mean, you are so on point. For me, it's clear, but this is the secret. The psychic abilities for the work that we do are something we can turn on and turn off. For a lot of people that go on the divine light side of the spiritual path, they're on 24/7. For us, we still have a physical body, so we want to turn the spiritual off when we don't need to and turn it back on only when we need to. And this is very important, because if you turn your spiritual bodies on only when you need to, you can live a normal, everyday life.
I had an individual contact me that when he was 13, he started getting, I guess you would call it a Kundalini activation, and he could start remote viewing. And there was this pretty girl at school, and he started remote viewing her while she was in the shower naked. And he got angelic beings basically told him not to do that anymore, and they took away his ability. And he wants to get his ability back, obviously, to be responsible about it. Is there anything that he could do? How could somebody who had their abilities shut off get their abilities turned back on?
So if somebody has an ability shut off and they want to get turned back on, the reason why I got turned off was not what he thinks. In this case, you're talking about your friend who was doing remote viewing and he was looking at a young girl in the shower. It's really kind of innocent. It's really not a big deal. That wasn't the reason why he got his ability shut off. The reason why he got his ability shut off is because the guardian angels that came in and took his ability away was because he was running the risk of being tempted or influenced by higher negative energies to begin to come in and take control of him, almost like a type of demonic possession. So how you would get your ability back is you would go back in your memory, in your imagination, the time of the event happened, go to that experience, and you would bow before the experience and say, I take responsibility for my actions, I understand that I'm responsible, and I have learned from this, and I'm ready to move on. And the abilities should begin to awaken back up because you have taken responsibility. The difference between an excuse and a responsibility is an excuse is someone saying, yeah, it's my fault, but we know that person's not going to change. Whereas a person who says, yeah, it's my responsibility, they're going to say, look, I made the mistake. I have learned from the mistake. I'm going to change myself. I'm going to change my behavior. I'm not going to do it again. When there's a taken responsibility, that means higher energies will begin to vouch for you and help you in your growth. After I got out of the military, the extraterrestrial beings who abducted me were related to the Norse gods. They were called the fairies, what were considered to be fairies. And they abducted me. Now, for 4 years, I worked with the white fairies. The 5th year, I worked with the black fairies. And there's a very powerful distinction in the white fairies, where they're about awakening, and the black fairies are there about changing. So we know when we do the black, what we also call the divine feminine, the dark side of ascension, is we get into real powerful change. So I worked with the Norse, and it was with the fairy race. That's who awakened me. When I was working with the Norse fairies, believe it or not, my childhood home, there was a satellite ship right outside my window, and I was taken to the satellite ship every night. I will say, for about the first year and a half it happened. So when I first came out of the service, I was living with my parents again, and I was having this hardcore abduction experience going on, and I didn't know what the hell was happening. I actually went to my father, and my father took me to the Edgar Cayce Institute in Virginia, once again before the internet and all that other stuff. So we get to the Edgar Cayce Institute, and while we were there, funny enough, we take the Edgar Cayce psychic test. My father passes one of the most psychic people ever, and I failed the test as one of the least psychic people that I could ever take the test. But they get me in touch with a local group here in Atlanta. I don't think the group is still around. And I give props to the guy who had a group for many years. His name was Sam Matthews. And that was in Atlanta, Georgia. When I went to Sam's, there was a guy speaking, because they had regular speakers came in. I think it was like every other Wednesday, twice a month. And the guy was talking about alien abductions. And after he finished to speak, I pulled him. I said, oh my God, this happened to me. What do I do? And he said, have you ever asked them how this related to your contract? I said, no. Who would know to ask something like that? He said, next time you get abducted, mentally project a contract and say, how is this related to my contract? And what happens is, humans that are being abducted on a regular basis, all through childhood, This abduction experience is happening because part of your contract is to work with the ET races. Now, you have the choice. You can be sheep or sheeple and be abducted, tested on, and used for studies, or you can awaken and begin the awakening process, but you have to engage them by saying, how's this related to my contract? At which time they start awakening you and go through this awakening process. And that's how it began for me. Working in the realm of self-realization, spiritual sciences for real growth, when we're looking at the side of divine light, this path is going to be benevolent for the most part. The only time you encounter malevolent, and it's actually at an increased rate, is when you get into channeled energy. The reason why is when people on the light side don't know how to verify that the source of the energy that they're working with, there's a high probability that they're being influenced negatively. And we find this a lot when people say, I'm talking to God, and I'm communicating with God, and I'm communicating with this being, I'm communicating with that being. And the one question that I always ask is the channeled source that you have contact with offering you a spiritual science that avails you to techniques to achieve all that they have? If not, I call BS. So that's on the divine light side. Now on the divine feminine side, we do channeling as well, but we do channeling of our different Akashic Records. We do channeling of our higher self. We never channel as an outside source. We encounter on the divine feminine side a very small percentage is benevolent, a very large percentage is malevolent. And the reason why is on the divine lights, on the divine feminine side, when you really open up, when you pierce the veil and get into higher consciousness stuff, you're going to have so many groups. It's like the Wild West. There is no police force out there that is governing anything. It's just dog eat dog. It's all about power and control. And this we find on all of these levels going up. And this is why on the divine light side, you don't have these higher ascended groups that work with all these secret government programs working with the masses, because there's no direct contact. But on the divine feminine side, there is direct contact with all these levels going all the way up, but only for the rare individuals that are able to walk this path. When I was encountering the fairy people, the fairy extraterrestrial races that interacted with me and woke me up, they look like 4.5 to 5 feet tall, very pale, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. They look like a miniature man or a woman. Now, I only saw females. I'm a guy, and my sexual orientation is towards females. And I would see Asian and Caucasian that would come around me, and they would interact with me. Now, when I saw the actual physical form, it was an alien form that looked like grays. Now, there's two distinctions. There are with the Norse people, with the grays that they work with. One was very small, like tiny grays, and the other ones were 14 to 17 feet tall, with torsos almost as long as my entire body. So a torso from waist to shoulder would be as long as from my feet to my head. Just enormous. And arms would be, 12 feet long. So they're absolutely enormous. In gravity, you would see them shuffling on the ground, kind of like in the movie Steven Spielberg with E.T., but when they had no gravity, they were full height. As far as the location where they're from, I can't tell you because I don't know. Their ships, the satellite ship that is outside my window that went through the whole process to me, looked like it was about 12 to 14 feet long, maybe 7 feet high, and then there were always two beings inside at a console with a clear space looking into the space where my room was. I never saw any of the bigger ships, and I never saw the mothership. I only ever worked at the satellite ship. from a very young age of having alien interaction throughout my childhood, and then in my 20s when I was reawakened, almost all of the alien races that I encountered, from Greys to Reptilians to Palladians to, I mean, there's so many races out there. I could, off the top of my head, I really can't think about them all. They saw humans as their children or their great-great-great-grandchildren, with a tremendous amount of love. Now, there's a very interesting experience that happens, and it happens to all of us. If you ever have a dream of a family reunion with parents in your home, it's evil, alien, extraterrestrials trying to influence you. If you have a dream in a family home or a family setting with only extended family, you know the extended family, but you don't recognize them, this is called your origin consciousness, or the origin ET race that you're from.
Do you think you might be a super soldier in Milab?
I do not believe in any of the work that I've accessed and all of the essential work in the Akashic Records that I have ever been involved with any of the super soldiers or Milab programs. Now, I have done remote viewing to some of the places where that's ongoing, and that's interesting to say the least. And one of the biggest things you to look at is they have other remote viewers that are sentinel beings on these different planets and on these different spaces, so you have to know how to navigate them to be able to see everything, but I was never personally involved in any programs myself. When I first began my remote viewing, where I was going to other planets, my first experience was going to Mars, and this is early in the 90s, 93, 94 time frame. And I don't know how I got involved. I got invited to a remote viewing group, or these two guys were having this remote viewing talk about this, and somebody had asked, has anyone ever done remote viewing off planet? And I said yes. I raised my hand like a schmuck, and I said I've been to Mars. They said, well, what did you see on Mars? I said, well, I didn't see anything above ground, but what I saw below ground was amazing. I saw ant-like tall, 7-8 foot tall ant-like people, with look like tall ants, that were interacting with humans in medical suits, and it was oxygenated. Wherever they were below ground, and they were doing some type of scientific stuff. And when I had said that, for the next couple of weeks, I had black K cars follow me around, and somebody from Arizona came out to visit me and wanted me to work for a remote viewing program out there. And of course, I denied it because I didn't want to get caught up in stuff that was going to limit my growth. Since then, I've continued to do periodically remote viewing for some super soldier and some Milab stuff on different planets, but also on different spaceships. So what I see personally, and I haven't gone too in depth, I haven't gone into a lot of places, and the main reason why is back then they didn't have sentinel remote viewers that were security. Now that they do, so you're going to be very cautious about remote viewing. These people, you go on, get on their radar, and man, it's some serious stuff. My remote viewing now is not as a form, so I don't go into form identity. I'm able to connect with the consciousness of the AI of the ships, plug in that way, and read everything that's going on all those different places. Occasionally, for somebody like my friend James here, I will do a little remote viewing into these places so I could uncover or help out for him. But for the most part, I pretty much try and stay out of it. Not so much for myself, because in the realm of spirituality, I'm a pretty bad dude. And I can handle myself really well, and I have enough alliances, several thousands of alliances on all these different levels of higher frequencies that watch my back, that I'm pretty good to go. My concern more is for the people around me who are innocent and can be affected by this stuff. So I really try to limit the type of work I do with remote viewing. My family thinks that I'm the biggest schmuck coming down the pike. I love my family to death. The interesting thing is whenever my family has a problem, before they call their doctor, they call me, I fix it, and then they rationalize, say, no, I really didn't have that going on, Joey. I don't know what you're talking about. Now, occasionally, they will have a physical issue, and I don't address physical issues. I only deal with spiritual issues. So if there's a spiritual root, I'll work with somebody. If a client has a physical issue that I can't address, I will not work with somebody. I do have a client I'm currently working with who has something I'd never addressed before, and they had, in the development stage of the childhood, they had severe MS, which has become very aggressive. I can do work and help resolve MS, multiple sclerosis. It's fairly easy if it's happening in adulthood, but in the development stage, it's a lot more difficult because you have to retrain the body of what a normal spine is that it never knew. So when it comes to healing work with my family, they think that I'm crazy. The website that I have for the work that I do is spirituallifeguard.com. We are available at spirituallifeguard@gmail. I have 2 Facebook pages. One is Joey the Healer or Joey the Spiritual Healer on Facebook, and then Spiritual Lifeguard on Facebook. So it's a couple different pages depending on what you're looking for. I think one of the biggest things that I really try and hold out is that I have a tremendous amount of integrity in all the work that I do. If I am unable to facilitate the results that are going to blow a person away, I'm not going to do the work, or I'm going to offer them a policy of 0 payment for 30 days. Pay me nothing for 30 days. I don't even take billing information, anything. If you don't have incredible results for my work, you don't pay me. If you do, then on good faith, I expect payment, and of course, I'll continue the work. If you have hopes and you have dreams, don't give up on them. If you are trying to figure out what you should do with your life, take a quick look online at all the jobs that are out there and narrow it down to the few jobs that you do like to find the career that's going to be fulfilling for you. And failure only happens when you stop trying. So you will have, as a real master student, consistent, back-to-back, over and over failures. It's when you stop learning from your failures that you actually fail. But if you keep trying, you keep working at it, you keep finding the solutions, then you will be a success in whatever you want to do. Believe in yourself.
Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.